I think you'll be surprised how deep this one goes. So let's get started. Since their announcement, people hoped the new dragon race, the new class about being a dragon, would be able to tank. Turns out they couldn't, they had two specs, and despite 10.1's plot being about discovering the legacy of the Black Dragons who are, the big, earthy boys who just scream tank, they probably won't pick up a sword and shield and jump into the fray. In a way, you could say that would suck, but there's a silver lining, and that is the role that Blizzard have been about as subtle as a thrown brick about is actually quite a lot more interesting. It's something that World of Warcraft has not had before. It's a support spec. The bit you might be surprised about is there is a literal narrative to this now. Okay, I'll get started. So, there is new evidence that Blizzard didn't even bother trying to hide that comes from the 10.1 PTR. Neltharion has some crazy data mine voice lines about his Dracthyr, and here they are.
You three shall be the examples all Dracthyr will follow. Sarkareth, my devastator, you shall rend your foes with the powers of the red and blue dragonflights. Viridia, my preserver, you shall heal our allies with the grace of green and bronze dragonflights.
I mean, come on guys, he literally called out the two specs by name. Sarkareth the Devastator, Viridia the Preserver. One's violent to a fault, the other one is caring to a fault, and they are our two in-game specs. But he actually says 3.
And Emberthal, you will wield the essence of the Black Dragonflight to augment all those around you with my power.
Yeah, Emberthal, an augmenter. Or, in terms of specs in a game, the Augmentation Evoker. That's new, but it's also kind of not, because Blizzard have been building this since pre-patch. That essence of the Black Dragonflight, that is something that we've seen a lot of in 10.07's lore books. It was related to Adamanthia, this Black Dragon, who you find in the Reach, who is basically trapped in a tormented stasis for daring to betray Neltharion. She was tasked with extracting the essence from the Dracthyr, and was successful, which explains why the class only had a few Black Flight abilities compared to the other 4 flights. And basically, something involved in their creation gave them free will, and all of these, desires to live, to love, to pet animals in Stormwind, which is not particularly useful for a custom-built race of super soldiers. So, Neltharion wanted to fix this problem by removing the essence, and Adamanthia, their mother figure, started to rebel. It's a bit like, what if the Jem'Hadar in Deep Space Nine wanted to suddenly go and start a family and write poetry, I guess. Now, here's something that I think we concede that's very crazy. So, Adamanthia, in Greek myth, is a nymph who hid Zeus from his father Cronus, who was the leader of the Titans. Zeus ultimately killed Cronus and overthrew the Titans. In this case, Blizzard are clearly suggesting that Emberthal is a bit like Zeus, child of Cronus who broke free from that terrible legacy. And also, Cronus ate his own children, but instead of Zeus, he was given a rock to swallow. Does that sound familiar? It's literally Galacroft. Anyway, back to the talk about a third spec. So Adamanthia and the Black Essence are the key here. The Dracthyr in general don't even have their memories of Adamanthia. They only have fragments of her floating around their brains, saying, "It is as if she holds part of us in her, sustained in more than just memory." And in the same series of lore books that you find in the Reach, one of her messages to Neltharion is this: "The extraction of Black Dragonflight essence from the Dracthyr has gone smoothly, though I worry it may permanently cripple their abilities." Which it obviously has. Maybe it may be reversible. But there is more. We have to re-examine some older stuff as well. We can also look at this, the Edict of the Adamant Vigil. This is a book that we really didn't pay too much attention to from the pre-patch of this expansion. It's a bit long, so for brevity, it explains that Emberthal's Wyrn was basically it was the SAS. It was the SEAL Team 6 of the Evokers. They had total operational freedom, but their role was very specific. It was to learn enemy weaknesses and amplify allies' strengths. So you see what Blizzard are basically saying in all these hints so far? The Evokers originally came in 3 flavors. Red and blue to nuke things, green and bronze to be the hospital, and basically the Captain Planet buff bot, which is Emberthal and these augmenters. They're clearly not complete as they are right now in the game. Without that black Dragonflight essence, they can devastate, they can preserve, but they cannot augment. So, the question is, where's the essence? Well, in 1007, we find Adamanthia in the Forbidden Reach, trapped in that stasis. We consider freeing her, but Abyssian notices something is up. He senses the essence is being forced into her, keeping her in an agonizing stasis. Now, in 10.1 so far, we've no signs of this being sorted out, except for one thing. So, do you remember this? Evokers only. Upon login, you are toasted with new specialization remembered toast, right? This was just some stuff that appeared in the data mining. Now, 10.1's PTR has unimplemented quests in an Evoker-only storyline that was called Adamanthia. They open with an in-game prompt telling you that you have remembered a new spec, and the actual quests revolve around Abyssian wanting to free Adamanthia, even though he was a little bit worried about it previously in 10.07. So it's a plotline they literally set up. The quests now only have notes, they don't have full text, but they basically say that the most efficient way to beat a boss is to boost/heal Abyssian while he fights. Rather, you may say augment instead of boost. Now, this quest has not been implemented any further, and with the patch being a month out, it is almost certainly not going to be suddenly done, right? Those characters are busy in 10.1 anyway. And also, let's be honest, they're not going to randomly drop a new spec on us, right? They would need to test this for months, especially if it's a support spec, which is something in a way that's, basically new to WoW entirely. Little asterisk to that, I'll talk about later. So the chance of Augmentation Evoker becoming available in patch 10.1 is 0, in my opinion. But the chances of it still existing, at least as an internal test, a plan that they had, or a plan that they still may have, I actually think that is relatively high. Otherwise, why ever write new specialization remembered in a public test realm build? Now, if they aren't going to have these quests be completed in 10.1, then when? Oh. Hey, Blizzard, what's this you've got lying around? It's the roadmap. There's bits of it that need filled in. The next time we get more story and quests is patch 10.1.7. And this, I think, to be a bit bullish, is their plan. Okay, this is the bit that may seem totally out there, but hey, come along for the ride. 10.1 is over. We've defeated Sarkarath, we've discovered the secrets of Aberys, a bunch of purple things have happened, we've become friends with the Niffin. Patch 10.1.5 is over. We've killed or disarmed Farak in whatever mega dungeon we end up getting in that patch. Who knows, right? But he's doing Shadow Flame stuff, whatever, the mega dungeon happens. So what are Blizzard going to do in 10.1.7? Well, they're going to have to set up patch 10.2, right? Obviously. That's what they did with the Forbidden Reach. The Forbidden Reach does an excellent job of setting up patch 10.1. It's really awesome to see them do that. But in our last patch, they had to do a campaign and 2 of the best heritage quests in the game, as well as the Bane questline. Awesome content. Which means, what about these unfinished quests? Will they have time to be finished up? And maybe even be a bit more full? The Dracthyr are one of the main focuses of Dragonflight. They're deeply connected to Dracthyr and what he's done. They're not just some quick new, group or, quick new class. No, but they are represented by main characters, right? Emberthal is really the character in the spotlight. And it's unfortunate we didn't see as much of her earlier on in Dragonflight, because I know a lot of people have dipped out of the game and haven't came back for 10.07. But seriously, her time in 10.07 with Abyssian was straight up fantastic. 10.07's campaign was, albeit short, really terrific, really well done, actually surprisingly good. So I think it would be pretty insane if Emberthal's arc was not continued through. I mean, just look at the Warbringers and the Harbingers and all of those cinematics that Blizzard did before past expansions like BFA, and how they ended up pretty much all tying directly into patch content and major story beats. Nosdormu and Emberthal, like, they were the featured characters of all of those shorts. Obviously, something's going to happen. So perhaps Emberthal beats Sarkareth with our help, and maybe the help of, her brothers, right? Abyssian, Rathian, Sibelian. Maybe she understands that the Black Dragonflight are not doomed to repeat the sins of their father, but they can use the same power for more, Neltharion and Nefarian both experimented to make others stronger, but they did so abusively with a heavy price. What if the good version of that is making other people stronger, right? Imagine the moment where she becomes something more than her father, and by returning the Black Dragonflight essence to the Dracthyr, she can complete them, restore their abilities as augmenters, restore their memories. They maybe will have time to, rework the quests to give them more stuff, so you actually unlock the spec and then use it in the quest line. And then you fight to free Adamanthia, who was a bit of a mother figure who was basically punished by Deathwing, Nefarian, for doing the right thing. Now, obviously, they would have to announce this spec after patch 10.1's launch, and they would have to test it on the PTR and do all of that. But imagine how cool it would be as a player to go through that narrative. It would be the first time that a spec would be added into the game in this way, with so much narrative weight behind it. And a pretty perfect time for Blizzard to introduce something that's a bit more out there and kind of have us cheer them on, because that seriously would be an impressive thing to do. But okay, fun's over, back to Planet Earth realism. This would be incredibly, incredibly hard to get right. I mean, what would an augmenter even do? If you look at Lost Ark as an example, the support characters don't do much direct damage, but instead they have to keep their buffs up on allies, so they're basically another DPS, but by increasing other people's DPS. Now, in World of Warcraft, that has existed in past eras, with paladins and shamans, albeit in a limited fashion. For Blizzard, it would just be designing gameplay around this, and that would be quite hard. Though I suppose, imagine if, when looking at unit frames, instead of healing people, you are augmenting people. Maybe they could actually see some form of gameplay there. And maybe we could have a system worked out with Warcraft logs such that, the damage granted is funneled back to them, and we don't have loads of people mauling out like we have with the PI situation. Now, of course, they could also just be a DPS with a slightly lower, they do a bit less damage themselves, but they provide a bit more of a buff to other people, and it roughly balances the whole thing out so that they're worth it, but not absolutely necessary. That's how Final Fantasy XIV does it. I suppose, in a way, some of Discipline Priest is like a little bit like that, because obviously, if Disc is like the best healer and does more damage than any other healer, then it's kind of tricky, so, there's minutiae to all these things. But I think there could be a way to do that. I mean, imagine power infusion, but part of your actual rotation. I don't know, maybe like the Demon Hunter and Monk debuffs, but you actually have to juggle them. Maybe there's a mini Bloodlust that can buff other people, but you'd be rewarded by, timing with other people's cooldowns. You can see a lot of opportunity for game there, but it would be complicated. I think it could work. Now, the other option would just be to do pure support, but that really does seem insane to get right. It wouldn't be able to solo content very well. And of course, a tank who buffs, like that could be a thing, but Blizzard have actually shot that one down. That's why I should note that whenever Morgan Day was asked by Towley about a tank spec, Morgan specifically shot down melee tank, but not a third spec in general, which I thought was interesting. Ultimately then, this would be a major step towards creating Ian Hazzikostas' fabled Game 1. He explained this while talking about power infusion, that there are two types of games, right? There's Game 1, which is the game that they are trying to make, where they can put cool stuff in the game and people get to have fun with the cool stuff, overcoming the game's challenges like raid bosses. And they think the idea that a priest can power infuse one of their allies and maybe tying that up with a key part of a fight or their allies, cooldowns, where that's like a really cool part of teamwork. whether it's happening in a World of Warcraft or even a tabletop RPG, if you're a support class in that, it's a cool player fantasy. But then, of course, there's Game 2. And that is the one where people min-max like crazy. They try to get rank 1 parses. They try to beat their own parse. They now feel like, oh, if I don't get a PI, then I can't parse with Warcraft logs. Now, he basically said that they have to be sensitive to Game 2 because a lot of people do play like that, but that their focus is making Game 1 the best that it can be. And if the community wants to, they can focus on Game 2. So, trying out a support spec for the first time, assuming it is not completely busted, I think would be a great addition to Game 1. It will be messy for Game 2, in my opinion. I care a lot more about Game 1 than Game 2, so that would be good for me, but obviously I could see how maybe this would not be amazing for everyone. But I think especially if this was introduced in a way that was blended in with the themes of the expansion, the main characters of the expansion, that does feel like throwing caution to the wind and actually going for it. Blizzard did that with the likes of dragon riding, and that was a massive game-changing win that's going to be carried into the future. So the more that they're willing to just take big bets and do cool shit, I think the happier we'll all be. Okay, with all that said, we should quickly take your hopes down a bit. There's no data mining of any relevant spells for an augmentation spec. They would have to be ridiculously careful to hide all this stuff because there's probably so much like data and spell types and bits and pieces that people could have sniffed out. And so far, they've had some pretty huge hints slip, but it's not like abilities for a spec that isn't in the game yet. It's not like those have been data mined. So if it is a secret, it is a well-kept one. The other thing to say is that this would be a massive undertaking, and in a way, you could threaten to destroy the meta of the game with this. Blizzard already do struggle with balance. I know, Rat Palace, you guys have been in a bit of a roller coaster the last little while. So it's one of those things, like what happens if having a support spec feels mandatory in all content, but the game only has one support spec? That could be rough. What if they're so bad that the exciting new spec is never invited to anything? So a new spec is an incredible risk in itself, never mind an entire new role within the game. That being said, everything that I've said about them needing to make high-risk, high-reward moves still stands. I want to see this gutsy, ballsy Blizzard that's willing to say, all right, in patch 10.1, we're going to completely just redo loot entirely and have a fully deterministic upgrade system. There you go. We're not used to that. So in the spirit of this Blizzard that is a lot more willing to actually just try shit out, I hope it happens. What about you? What kind of augmentation evoker do you want to see? So let me know. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming along on this wild speculative ride, and I'll catch you next time.